Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at a book which I found very exciting to review, mainly because I think I agreed very much with a lot of the comments made by the writer Daniel J. Gervais. It's called Restructuring Copyright, the re being in brackets, and it's got a subtitle, A Comprehensive Path to International Copyright Reform, because this is a book about reforming the copyright laws, and I think it's long overdue. It's something that should have been looked at much earlier because of the huge changes that have very quickly taken place in very recent years. So therefore this book I think has a great deal of value. It comes to us from Edward Elgar Publishing. They're an independent firm of publishers producing very high quality work for us in the legal sphere, and much of the work that is produced is of a very high academic level. It's part of the Elgar monographs in intellectual property law, naturally because it's copyright. It means the book's available as a book and an e-book, and it's also available at Elgar Online, so there's an online version too. Now, my wife Elizabeth and I gave a title of our book review the following: A Bold and Persuasive Statement of the Changing Face of Copyright in the 21st Century. And that's what you're getting here, because this book is only a small book, but it's a book which I think is very important for the point it's making about the crossroads we're at and how we're going to have to review globally as well as nationally, how we review not just copyright actually, but intellectual property as a whole. Because in the past there's been an awful lot of ripping off going on, all sorts of problems, which has led to regulation and a whole range of new approaches, but that's still not enough. However, let's look at this book today. Here it is, there's the front cover, it's a hardback. There's the spine, and then there's the back. Now, the book runs to something like, well, under 400 pages, 350 pages. The index is by page numbering, so things are very relatively easy to find. There's the start of the index there. You can see even on the back page there's some footnoting at the bottom, basically looking at specific authorities to justify assertions made. In the middle of the book you can see the Berne Convention is covered in some detail, not surprisingly at all, of course. Then we've got here, this is the list and statement about what the Elgar monographs on IP law does, and sets out what they're proposing to do. There's the front page. Then after that you've got the detail concerning find and use the online system. Then you've got the various contents, the parts that make up the book. There are in fact 2 parts, and the total number of chapters is 13. There's an introduction at the beginning. Then there's an epilogue towards a new Berne Convention, which is the basis of the book. Then there are 2 appendices: a primer on fair use and fair dealing, and the Berne Appendix Unpacked is Appendix 2, then the index. There's some figures in there, some tables, and then there's a bit of detail about the author, Mr. Gervais. Actually, he's a professor of law at Vanderbilt University Law School, so I better call him Professor Gervais, but Daniel might suffice. There's the preface, which I found very interesting. Do read it before you look at the book itself, because I think he sets out actually quite a lot, and I've borrowed a little bit from the preface just to set out the scheme of things. Then there's an acknowledgement. It says how to use this book. Again, I think that's quite important because it's quite a complex book for people who won't know too much about it. The previous publications, and then you start off with the introduction itself, and then after that again you can see copious footnoting actually for the introduction, and then the first chapter, it's split into parts. Part 1, in identifying structural issues, and then you've got the copyright in common law jurisdictions. You see it's running through. There's paragraph numbering, not too substantial, but it's sufficient, and you've got again the footnoting. So I think all in all it's been a very well researched book, which is what we expect from Elgar. Elgar never let us down. They give us a wonderful service, for scholars and for practitioners as well. I'm indebted to them for taking on the mantle of these books because they do make our lives so much easier. So what do we say about the book? Well, we say this: the book represents a substantial call for a full reform of the system of copyright to fit the requirements of the 21st century. Daniel Gervais writes that the current lack of equilibrium and the deficient structure of copyright results in part from a process of historical changes and accretions to the list of copyright rights, and in part from a lack of clarity as to its purpose. Well, that's fairly damning, isn't it? But in fact, what he's trying to do gently is say, look, we've got to get our act together. Let's start thinking again about what we're going to do. And I think he's absolutely right to kick-start the argument about reform, which is what he does here. So for many people, this call for a review cannot come too quickly because of the massive problems which have been thrown up by the changes we've seen in what we call information technology. Frankly speaking, many of us have not treated this subject seriously enough. However, Gervais does, and that's really what the benefit of this book is all about. And of course, the biggest single headache at the moment is the internet itself, which has changed forever our online world, leading to what has been described as a structure of copyright which, in its current form, has become inadequate and, to use the phrase of the moment, unfit for purpose. Now, I say that lightly in some respects, but the fact is that when the internet was unleashed and all of these issues concerning identifying intellectual property rights, things like copyright, suddenly became much more important. And I'm talking really about the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. What you're talking about now is the fact that we came into it unprepared. And really this is the main theme throughout Gervais' book. And we found, as I say, this to be a bold and persuasive work by Gervais, and it asks all the pertinent questions of the moment, many of which still remain completely ignored, I have to say, by many who want the current antiquated system to remain because it suits some people's purposes. And I don't make that statement lightly either, because I think there is an unwillingness by some people to want to change. The fact is we do have to change because at the moment some people's rights are clearly being trodden on. And I think, again, that's an important point to put across. However, Gervais submits that the international copyright system is in need of root and branch rethink. And how right he is, because in essence, he aims to inform the debate about the future of copyright and its influence on human creativity, especially with the advances in artificial intelligence. And I have to say again, we are coming to this very late in the day, and we have not prepared ourselves for where we're going in the 21st century on this. However, more of that, I'm sure, on another occasion. And yes, it's rightly an ambitious and far-reaching book. That's what his aim was, where the author sets out to diagnose in some detail the problems faced by copyright before eloquently mapping out a path for comprehensive and structured reform. Frankly, it remains a welcome read for all involved in copyright matters, professional or lay people, and unrepresented parties with a problem. And again, I think this book, although it's quite complicated to read, and you have to have a fairly good understanding of the law of copyright and how IP works, I do think that unrepresented parties would not have too much difficulty reading the book. The main objectives are set out by the author to identify structural and other deficiencies within the current system and to outline a structured approach to copyright reform. So it's not just a question of criticising, he's coming up with some solutions as well. And of course he does just that, and is a jolly good read with much commendable detail. So restructuring copyright is set out in the following way. You've got part one, which is diagnostic in nature, whilst part two offers detailed and concrete pathways to improve the current system. And then there's the epilogue at the back, which is a clear recommendation to revise the Berne Convention, which is proposed. Gervais does like the word pathways, I hasten to add. And I just mean that as an observation, creative observation. Now, Gervais also gives us a reasoned and novel voice to a copyright debate. In other words, we can all win. And I think that's a good point, because we can, and that's actually put out clearly in his preface. Because it's all too often driven, unfortunately, this problem is driven by ignorance and partisan self-interest. This is the copyright debate itself, so we do have to look again at where we are. We agree that it should be required reading for all copyright scholars, advisors and practitioners with an interest in the way in which the subject of copyright can be developed in the near future. And obviously it has the wider implications for intellectual property as well. The book was published in 2017 and it's available, as I say, as a book, an e-book, and it's available online. Let's just have another look at it again. There's the front of it there. There is the side, and then you've got the spine at the back. Now, if we just open it, what I'm going to do is just go to the back, because I mentioned the epilogue. And I think the epilogue, these are the appendices which I've got at the moment. But the epilogue is actually here. And this epilogue towards a new Berne Convention, it's on page 295. This is where the recommendations are. He structures that quite well. Then he gives us a proposals for an act, which I think is very good. So as I say, it's not just coming to us with a criticism, it's coming to us with a solution, some solutions as well. A very good book. I'd like to thank Elgar again very much for producing it, and to Daniel for the huge amount of work. And the fact that I hope he's triggered, it's a favourite word at the moment, he's triggered people to sort of perhaps initiate some action to get some changes, because I think they're overdue and we need to get on with it. So thank you very much indeed. It's a good book, this, and well worth reading. Bye-bye.